What if the perfect noble lady was executed as a traitor? Metal crashed against metal, echoing through the Lancaster estate. Explosions roared outside as soldiers stormed through the gates. Open the gate! Arrest the traitor! Search every room! Boots pounded across marble floors. Doors were kicked down one after another. Break it open! Inside the last remaining chamber stood Duchess Edel Lancaster. The Empire once called her the most elegant flower of high society, graceful, generous, all-knowing in etiquette and virtue, the perfect lady. Yet tonight, she stood alone. Soldiers flooded the room. Duchess Edel Lancaster, one declared coldly. By order of His Majesty, you are to be taken prisoner. For a moment, she said nothing. When did it all go wrong? She had accepted every responsibility placed upon her shoulders. She endured humiliations, whispers, political burdens, all for the honor of the Lancaster name. She polished her pride until it sparkled, believing patience would someday bear sweet fruit. But pain fades quickly, and patience? It earned her chains. Cold iron bound her wrists. She didn't resist. She didn't run. All her life, she had been raised for one purpose. Count Canyon's only daughter, Edel Canton, groomed carefully to marry into one of the Empire's four most extraordinary families. She fulfilled that role perfectly, becoming the wife of the aging Duke of Lancaster. For 1 year and 8 months, she lived as Duchess. Who could have imagined that her flawless reputation would crumble overnight? The Duke had been accused of treason against the Empire, and she, as his wife, became the wife of a traitor. Dragged across the courtyard, whispers followed her like venom. She really was the most beautiful. What a pity. The perfect lady? How amusing! She collapsed where she stood, not because she couldn't stand, but because she feared facing death upright. Her vision blurred, but even then she clenched her jaw. I will not fall apart, not at the very end. In the Imperial Hall, laughter rang out. Bring the criminal forward, a voice commanded lazily. Emperor Demarcus Tuberian sat high above them all, a faint smirk resting on his lips. Edel was forced to kneel. Once praised as the pride of nobility, she now knelt lower than a servant. Nobles who once bowed to her avoided her gaze. How pitiful, someone muttered. A traitor's wife. The emperor looked down at her with cool amusement. She was once called the Empire's most perfect lady, he said lightly. Tell me, Laszlo, does she still look perfect to you? Murmurs rippled through the court. Laszlo, one of the emperor's loyal supporters, a man who rose from the nouveau riche ranks, stepped forward calmly. Unlike the old nobles, he did not avert his eyes. Sire, he replied evenly, at this point, she is no different from anyone else brought before you. A soft chuckle escaped the emperor. Indeed. Edel's hands trembled against the marble floor. Is this what her patience had earned her? Was this the reward for swallowing every insult, enduring every political storm without complaint? She thought of her life, born and raised to connect powerful families, a decorative rope tying alliances together. Nothing more. The emperor's voice cut through her thoughts. Bind her. Chains tightened again. Pain stung, but it no longer mattered. This was the end of Duchess Edel Lancaster. Not with dignity, not with pride, but as the wife of a traitor, abandoned, mocked, and crushed beneath the empire she once served faithfully. Duchess Edel Canyon, stop being so stubborn. Do you dare defy your father? The shout rang sharply through the Count of Canyon's estate. Edel stood still, her hands clenched into fists. But mother, her voice trembled. There won't be another chance, her mother pressed. If you marry into one of the four great houses, even your father will bow his head to you. Becoming a duchess is an honor beyond measure. At the very least, act for the sake of this family. Edel lowered her gaze. Did they even realize what they were asking of her? I'm doing this for you, her father snapped harshly. Everything I've built is for a useless child like you. Those words burned into her memory. For years, she endured that household with a single thought in mind: escape. If she became Duchess of Lancaster, she could finally leave the Canyon estate behind. So she endured. She bore the cold stares in the Duke's mansion, managed dozens of account ledgers, oversaw more than 100 servants, hosted endless banquets, welcomed guests every single day, and she did it all flawlessly, smiling, poised, perfect, all for the moment freedom would finally arrive. But, "Run away, madam, the Emperor's army is closing in." That was the moment everything shattered. As she ran through the empty corridors of the Lancaster Duchy, panic clawed at her chest. Where had all the servants gone? Gunpowder filled the air. Only then did she realize the truth. The Lancaster family had planned independence from the empire, a plan carried out without telling her, a plan that failed. And she, as her wife, became the wife of a traitor. Her breath grew ragged. The life she once dreamed of was simple: warmth, kindness, a home that felt human. Yet, despite managing that grand mansion perfectly, not a piece of it belonged to her. She had become the ideal lady her father demanded: polished, obedient, hollow. Was her entire previous life just suffering meant to push her towards escape? They call it a trophy bride, but I was just a slave. Slavery was abolished long ago. That was the only reason they didn't name it as such. "You're still trying to keep that arrogant dignity?" sneered Lorraine Lancaster. Daria Lancaster laughed beside her. She acted like a real duchess from the day she married in, when she was only bought with gold. Didn't the Count of Canyon confess everything? Who gave her that title anyway? Their words were sharper than ever before, but Edel remained calm. "Don't you need rest?" she replied quietly. "Save your energy. Insults are pointless." Inside, however, she was calculating. There would be a moment when their guard dropped, and she needed enough strength for one final act. Better to die than live as a play-in ship. All the Lancaster men were dead. The Emperor had handed her over like a gift. Count Chrysis promised to use her as a maid, but that was just another word for captive. A well-kept prison was still a prison. "Old habits die hard," she murmured as she woke before dawn. Today was the day she would be transferred. Her last morning alive. Blue light streamed through the narrow prison window like a silent farewell. How beautiful the sky is! Her final meal was surprisingly extravagant. She chewed slowly, almost gratefully. Then came the call. "Lorraine Lancaster, Daria Lancaster, come out." Carriages waited in the noble district. She steadied herself. There was only one task left: to die with dignity. If the servant escorting her wasn't too watchful, if the carriage passed a crowded road, she would jump. With luck, it would be instant, and at last she would be free. The wheels grinding against the road as tension hangs thick in the air. She never imagined he would come himself. Of all possibilities, she didn't expect the commander of the Emperor's army to accompany her in person. The carriage is shaking, she notices, trying to calm her trembling hands. Maybe he came so he could keep an eye on her. After all, he clearly doesn't trust her. A man of his rank wouldn't bother with a fallen duchess unless he had a reason. Her fingers won't stop shaking. That must be why he silently drapes his cloak over her shoulders. The fabric is warm, heavy, unexpectedly gentle. If she throws the cloak back at him, could that give her a second to leap from the carriage? She hears another carriage somewhere in the distance. Her heart pounds. "I can do this," she tells herself. If she jumps now, she might escape. But before she can move, don't even think about it. He already knows. That's why he placed her in the same carriage as him. This man, he has no intention of leaving her alone. The carriage slows. It creaks to a halt at the estate that will now cage her. The doors swing open, a sharp glance, a cold breeze. This is where she'll be living from now on? She steps down and stumbles. Her ankle twists. Before she falls, something catches her. Strong arms. Solid. Warm. She freezes. "Sorry." she murmurs, cheeks flushing, hoping he doesn't notice how startled she is. He releases her without a word. Inside, the housekeeper calls out sharply, "Show her to the room at the end of the corridor." Another maid, Mina, answers softly, "Yes, ma'am." Whispers ripple through the hall. She used to be a duchess. I can't believe we get to order her around. But instead of cruelty, she is met with something unexpected. Her door creaks open. The room is small, plain, cold. Still, they bring her a change of clothes. They bring her food. She looks around slowly. So this is how ordinary people live, in rooms this size. Everything about this place whispers the same thing to her. You're not a noble anymore. She shivers. The water is cold. Do they not use hot water here? From now on, she'll have to bathe in cold water, even in winter. Strange. It's not like this house should be poor. The estate itself looks worn, almost shabby for a count's residence, but she forces herself to stop thinking about it. Right now, something else surprises her. She's hungry. After everything she endured, she thought she would never want to eat again. She reaches for a piece of fruit. Crunch. It's sweet, delicious. There was a time she believed she would never take another bite of fruit, a time when she thought death was her only choice. It wasn't that she truly wanted to die. She simply refused to live as someone's plaything, a spoil of war, a body claimed for filthy desires. Her fist tightens. Will she be able to taste fruit again tomorrow? Perhaps Count Chrysis won't try to touch her tomorrow either. Perhaps she can endure. Maybe she can live quietly here, working as a maid, fending for herself, waiting for the day peace finally finds her. For now, all she wants is something simple: to eat, to survive, and to live. Sir Cripud came to collect the prisoner himself that evening, the nobles whispered, smirking. To them, he looked like a man rewarded with the greatest spoil of war. They had no idea who he truly was. Laszlo had signed the contract at the very last minute, joining the conquest not for honor, not for glory, but for payment. And yet, he and his band of mercenaries accomplished more than the emperor's finest knights ever could. "Tell me what you want, anything at all," the emperor had offered him. "The contract clearly states the amount," Laszlo replied coldly. "I require nothing more." Despite possessing overwhelming power, he had no interest in noble titles or social standing. Authority meant little to him. That was precisely why the emperor wanted him close. He would make the perfect war dog. But to turn him into more than just a loyal beast, the emperor needed a bait, something irresistible. Making him a count wasn't enough. That thought dated back 2 years, to the victory banquet. The murmurs had been unbearable. A mercenary becoming a count? Does he expect to be treated like one of us? Though Laszlo had been the driving force of their triumph, he was never truly welcomed among the aristocracy. And that night, his eyes had lingered on one person, Adelaide Lancaster. That was the gamble. The dice had already been cast. Now the emperor simply had to watch. Laszlo had never lost a bet in his life. That snake of an emperor. The only reason Laszlo accepted the noble title was for his little sister. As a count, he could ensure she married into a respectable family. That was all he ever wanted. But perhaps he had been greedy. Though he wore the title of nobility, he was still common-born, a mercenary. The aristocracy would always look down on him and, by extension, on his sister. From what he had witnessed, noble marriages were nothing but transactions, fathers selling daughters to aging dukes in exchange for influence, old men remarrying despite already having lovers and grown children. And among all those arrangements, there had been Adelaide Lancaster. She smiled while being given away as a second wife to an old man. If she truly despised it, why didn't she run? Was it greed? Trading her youth for power? Unlike him, who became a noble overnight, she had been born into privilege, raised in it, shaped by it. He thought he would never see her again. Yet now, the very same Adelaide Lancaster was under his roof. as a maid. That devious emperor. If Laszlo had refused to accept her, she would have been sold off elsewhere. Instead, the emperor handed the fallen Duchess to him, perhaps as a warning to those who dare conspire. Back at the estate, the servants wasted no time. "Those rags don't suit you, do they?" one mocked. "Are those soft hands meant for washing laundry?" another sneered. The former Duchess lowered her head and nodded silently. "Did you even train her properly?" "Don't worry, what could she possibly do?" "You think the dead will rise to avenge her?" Laughter echoed through the halls. The housekeepers scoffed. "Treat her however you like." From the moment she was introduced to the staff, the hostility never ceased. Yet, strangely, there was no one happier about the fall of House Lancaster than the servants themselves. In the laundry room, Adelaide scrubbed in silence. "If we get scolded because the washing isn't done properly, it'll be harder for all of us," a maid warned. Adelaide didn't answer. She focused only on the task in front of her. She didn't care about the ridicule. The real problem was whether her body could endure this labor. Every breath felt heavy, every muscle burned, but she closed her eyes for a moment. All of this is possible because she's alive, so she chose gratitude instead of despair. And yet, as the sound of shattering porcelain echoed in her memory, a familiar voice resurfaced. "Adelaide, you useless girl, a worthless excuse for a daughter." The past refused to let her go, but this time she would endure.